What's the most shocking secret double life you've ever personally seen revealed? My ex-wife had been fired from 2 jobs within 9 months before finally landing a position at Hank's Furniture. After a couple of months there, she told me she needed to travel 3 days a week to work at one of their other locations about 2 hours away. Before long, those 3 days turned into 5. She explained that in this new role, she wouldn't get paid until after the furniture was delivered, so her paychecks would take time to come through. Soon, she began staying overnight with her boss, a woman. I'll admit, it made me uneasy, but when I looked her up, I found she was real, and indeed the store manager at that location, so I tried to quiet my doubts. Still, the money wasn't coming in. Meanwhile, I was working full-time, trying to provide for our 2 kids, and wondering where all her supposed income had gone. I had to keep borrowing money from my parents and in-laws just to stay afloat, while my ex-wife was rarely home. It was an incredibly stressful time. I had made the mistake of putting her in charge of most of our finances years earlier, so I didn't realize she had maxed out our credit card. When I finally noticed she hadn't been paid after a full month, I told her she needed to quit and find a local job. She became furious, insisting she was about to be paid. Sure enough, the next day, $3,600 appeared in our account. It seemed to validate her story, at least for the moment. A few more weeks passed, and I told her again that it was time to come home for good. This time, she reluctantly agreed. While home, she took our daughter to the store one Saturday to pick up something she claimed to have left behind. She even sent me a photo of herself and our 5-year-old at Hank's Furniture as proof. Not long after, she said she went back once more to collect her final paycheck and to say goodbye to her boss, depositing around $2,450. Then, one day, completely by chance, I looked over our recent bank statements and noticed an expensive lunch charge, over $50 at Houlihan's. My anger flared. I decided to call the store directly and ask for the woman manager my ex-wife had claimed to be working and staying with. When the manager answered, I said, "Hi, this is Hernsey, the husband of Mira. Did you have lunch with her on Monday?" There was a pause before she replied, "Who?" I repeated, "Mira. She worked for you and stayed with you these last few months." The manager's tone sharpened. "I don't know that person, and she never worked for me or stayed with me." My stomach dropped. I felt sick, stunned, and furious all at once. Desperate to confirm what I already knew in my gut, I went to the Hanks branch in our town. They told me she had been fired months earlier and had never been transferred to another location. At that point, panic set in. I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. That was when everything truly unraveled. I discovered the maxed out credit card and traced the 2 supposed paychecks back to a same-day loan company, the kind that charges outrageous interest rates. When she was served with the divorce papers, she flew into a rage and trashed my house. Not long after, I learned she had been staying with her high school ex-boyfriend, likely for drugs and other forms of comfort. She had gone to astonishing lengths to maintain her double life, lying about work, faking paychecks, and deceiving everyone around her to feed her addictions and secret affairs. In the end, I was left feeling utterly betrayed and like a complete fool for believing her for so long. The good news? She never showed up for the divorce hearing. I was granted full custody of our children. After a year of visitations set at my discretion, she tried to take me back to court for a fixed schedule, even though she'd barely shown up for the visits I had already allowed. She didn't appear for that court date either, costing me $1,000 in legal fees for nothing. Eventually, I remarried, the love of my life. After a year together, we began the process for her to legally adopt my 2 older children. I had extensive documentation, 58 slides in total, showing that my ex hadn't paid child support and had rarely bothered to see the kids. We won the case, and the judge said everything I had always wanted to tell her, right there in open court. It was the closure I'd been waiting for. My kids no longer have to suffer from a mother who never truly showed up, and we finally have the peace we all deserved. Story 2. My father-in-law. About 2 years ago, my soon-to-be wife was approached by a fairly new employee at her workplace. The woman began asking questions like, "Is your father's name such and such?" and other subtle inquiries. This went on for a couple of days until she finally revealed that she had a brother and that she, the woman, was married to him. Naturally, my girlfriend was shocked and skeptical. To support her claim, the woman showed a photograph in which her husband bore an uncanny resemblance to my girlfriend's brothers. Gradually, the story began to seem more believable, and my girlfriend agreed that we should meet them for lunch. I went along for moral support, and because the whole situation seemed more than a little suspicious. At that time, my girlfriend's parents were still married and living together. I had always sensed an uneasy vibe from my future father-in-law, though I assumed it was just the usual awkwardness that comes with meeting a partner's parent. When the couple arrived for lunch, any lingering doubts disappeared instantly. My girlfriend and her supposed brother looked so strikingly alike in both appearance and manner that further questioning felt pointless. We turned the conversation toward his life instead, and both he and his wife proved to be warm and pleasant people. They had even brought along their baby girl for us to meet. It turned out that he was about 4 or 5 years younger than my girlfriend. As the eldest of 7 siblings, ranging all the way down to a child of about 8 at the time, she quickly noticed the overlap in ages. A couple of years after his birth, his mother had sent him to live with his grandparents in a small rural town. Now, in their early 20s, he and his wife had moved to our city for work and to raise their daughter. By pure coincidence, his wife ended up working at the same place as my girlfriend, setting this entire story in motion. As the conversation unfolded, the pieces began to fall into place. He showed us a photograph of his mother, someone my girlfriend actually remembered. To our astonishment, my manipulative father-in-law had, years earlier, taken my 4 or 5-year-old girlfriend along on visits to his mistress. We have not seen him since that lunch. My girlfriend confessed that she feels uneasy even speaking to him now. She decided that this could not be ignored, and I persuaded her to first speak with her brothers and sisters. 4 of them, all over 18 and living nearby, joined us, and together we confronted my father-in-law. When he arrived at our house, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. Upon being questioned about the son, he coldly admitted the truth, insisting that he owed no one an explanation. I watched as my girlfriend's heart broke while he spoke. When asked whether this was his only other child, he revealed, without remorse, that he had 2 more sons, 9 and 7 years old, both with the same woman, but different from the mother of the first boy. Later that evening, they told their mother. She admitted that she had already suspected something was wrong. When the full truth came out, my mother-in-law completely broke down, threatening to leave him. She had known about the younger children, but not about the son we had met that day. My father-in-law, in his usual vile manner, turned the blame on my girlfriend and began shouting at her. When he raised his hand toward her, I stepped between them and pushed him away. Though not an old man, years of manual labor had made him strong, and when he shoved me back, I fell to the floor. Before he could reach me again, my 2 brothers-in-law intervened, holding him back as he screamed for my girlfriend to get out. She left, and none of them has spoken to him since. My mother-in-law never did leave him, though they now sleep in separate rooms. In truth, little changed, except that several of his children now despise him. My girlfriend has even seen him with the other woman several times since. If anything, confronting him may have made his life easier. He no longer needs to hide his double existence. In the end, we learned that my father-in-law had 3 more children with 2 other women. Story 3. For me and my youngest sister, everything came to light when I started graduate school in the Northeast. At the time, my bank, Bank of America no less, didn't have any branches in my new state, so I opened a local account and stopped using my old one, which only had a few $100s in it anyway. A couple of months into the semester, I checked my Bank of America account online for no real reason and froze. There were dozens of transactions, beginning with a deposit of around $25,000, followed by a long list of ATM withdrawals and checks. For a brief moment, I thought I must have accidentally logged into someone else's account, but then it hit me, as clearly as if I'd known it all along. It was my mom. I had been living in cognitive dissonance for a long time. All my life, she had done strange things and lied about them, and while I always pretended to believe her, some part of me quietly suspected the truth. The last check listed in my account was to my little sister for $5,000, and it had bounced. I called her immediately and told her to check her account. She did, and it was completely drained. That's when she also discovered her freshman year tuition hadn't been paid. My sister understandably panicked, and I told her to contact the financial aid office right away. Over the next couple of months, she managed to pull things together through loans and later scholarships, and eventually she was okay. In this situation, my grandmother was meant to pay my sister's tuition, with my mom acting as the middle person writing the check. Instead, she persuaded my grandmother to transfer the money to my account since both Nana and I used Bank of America. Then, using my information, she ordered new checks and an ATM card in my name and withdrew all the money. She even went to my sister's bank and somehow convinced them to let her withdraw my sister's savings of $5,000, then tried to cover it up with a check from my account. My sister and I were shocked and suspected drug use might be involved. Christmas came a few weeks later, and when we went home, we attempted some kind of intervention. It turned into a complete disaster. Mom refused to engage, kept deflecting, and when we pressed her, she launched into an odd, fake crying story about antidepressants supposedly causing blackouts and memory loss. We eventually gave up, realizing reasoning with her was pointless. Then, on Christmas night, she went out and never came home. The next morning, when we realized she was missing, we called her best friend, the only adult friend we knew she had, and learned that a bail bondsman had called because Mom had been arrested for driving under the influence that night. Later that evening, she returned home and immediately launched into a story about attending a birth. She claimed to have delivered a baby, even giving it a name and a weight. My sister and I were stunned. We reminded her that she had been in jail and that we had spoken to her friend. Mom, however, insisted it was all a misunderstanding involving a 19-year-old boy she had been with who supposedly didn't have identification, and she refused to engage in any rational conversation. Over the following months, my youngest sister and I talked at length, spoke with our dad, and later visited our grandmother. We began to realize that these manipulative behaviors had been happening throughout our entire lives. It wasn't just about drugs, though they played a part, but rather a long pattern of deceit that had finally become careless enough to be exposed. She had been carrying out deeply calculated schemes for years, elaborate, manipulative lies that went far beyond covering up her own misbehavior. They were part of a long-running pattern of theft, control, and psychological manipulation. There is far too much to explain fully here, but both my grandparents and my dad believed they were paying for my very expensive college education, which led me to take out more than $100,000 in loans. She also almost certainly stole at least $50,000 from my grandparents, money that had been set aside for my two other sisters' college funds. It is very likely that she became pregnant with me to prevent my dad from divorcing her years ago. Later, during their divorce, she may have plotted to harm him for life insurance money, a plan that involved a stolen gun and the manipulation of one of the 19-year-olds she was romantically involved with. Beyond all of that, there is reason to believe she may have poisoned her younger sister, who died when I was a baby from multiple organ failure without any formal diagnosis. My youngest sister and I eventually cut off contact, though it took a few years because our two middle sisters, the twins, continued to take her side, and we didn't want to lose them. Eventually, though, more trouble arose with one of the twins, who was clearly struggling mentally at the time. She was cruel to me, and I simply couldn't take it anymore. Since then, I haven't spoken to or seen my mom in about 7 years. For a long time, I was extremely cautious about keeping my location hidden online because I genuinely feared she might try to harm me to claim my share of the inheritance from my grandmother. Now that my grandmother has passed, that concern is behind me. I also live on a different continent now, and I'm confident my mom is far too lazy to ever get on a plane to cause trouble. Both my youngest sister and I have dealt with anxiety and depression, as well as difficult romantic relationships, largely because our mom had conditioned us to have no sense of boundaries. Thankfully, we've both received therapy and are now doing well. My dad has since remarried a wonderful woman, and we have a supportive stepbrother. We've also reconnected with my dad's side of the family, people our mom had always portrayed as awful, only to discover that, while imperfect, they are genuinely kind and decent. I now have a stable job, and for the first time, I can honestly say that I'm happy. I've come to believe that toxic people must be removed from your life immediately, no matter who they are, and that family is something you choose. I deeply value my good friends, even though most of them live far away, as they've been an incredible source of support, not only through my mother's deception, but also through all the challenges life brings. I am profoundly grateful for the good people in the world and for the stability and happiness I have now found. Story 4. My roommate's girlfriend, let's call her a steaming pile of nonsense, or Spawn for short, entered his life through Facebook. She claimed she had once dated one of his old friends, and that's how they reconnected. They chatted for months before meeting in person. According to her, she was a nurse who worked irregular hours, had 2 daughters, both born from SA, and was battling ovarian cancer, requiring weekly treatments at a world-renowned hospital. When they finally met, she admitted she wasn't currently working because of her illness. Later, my roommate discovered that she had actually given birth to another baby about a month before they met and had placed the child for adoption. He found himself torn, deeply in love with her, yet weighed down by the thought that she might not have much time left. One weekend, he decided to visit her in her town, hoping to make the most of whatever time they had together. At first, everything seemed fine, at least on the surface. But one evening, while we were talking in the kitchen, he noticed several suspicious charges on his bank account, dozens of transactions from an online auction site, and multiple Domino's pizza orders, all delivered to her address. The total came to nearly $1,800, all spent within just a few days. Stunned and furious, he decided then and there to drive straight to her town, determined to confront her and, if necessary, bring in the police. A couple of days later, he brought her to our house for the weekend. She looked drained and spent nearly the entire time asleep, claiming she was just exhausted. After dropping her off, he realized all his prescribed pain medication was missing, which explained her dazed, zombie-like state. Not long after, he caught her smoking and abusing prescription pills. It was heartbreaking to watch the woman he cared so deeply for spiral out of control. On another weekend visit, while he was away, the cleaners stopped by. I asked if he had left them a check, and he told me to grab cash from the cabinet. I paid them with what I had in my pocket and went back to get the rest, but the money was gone. More than $2,000 in loose bills, which he had been saving for a new exhaust, had simply vanished. Then came the news that she was pregnant. Despite that, she kept popping pills and drinking. Soon, empty liquor bottles began turning up in odd places, under the sink, in the garage, tucked into random corners. A few months later, she lost the baby. I went out of state for a work training trip and left some cash in my room for gifts or emergencies. When I returned home, $480 were missing. I mentioned it to my roommate in passing, and somehow, she immediately guessed the exact amount. Calmly, she said she had taken it for child support. 2 weekends later, she showed up again, this time with her children. Before we knew it, they had all moved in. The kids started school, and she got a job at an early Head Start program. She mentioned that the school nurse position would open the following year and claimed it was practically guaranteed to be hers. She just needed to apply. My roommate even filled out the application for her. When that year finally came, she said she needed to renew her nursing license. His parents went out of their way to help, buying her study books, driving her to the testing center, waiting for her, and even guiding her back home because she didn't know the route. She passed the test, barely, and soon announced that she'd gotten the school nurse position. Each morning, she would get the kids ready, put on her scrubs, and head out to work, supposedly finishing around 3:30 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, my roommate was paying for everything: rent, bills, groceries, drowning in debt while waiting for her first paycheck. But week after week, she kept saying she'd forgotten to submit her time card, from September all the way through late November. I told his family that something didn't add up. One day, I drove by her supposed workplace 3 different times. Her truck was never there. Suspicious, his sister started digging around and uncovered the truth. She didn't work there at all. The school nurse position hadn't even been open. Her sister went a step further and checked her academic records. There was no trace of her ever having attended college for nursing. Then she called the supposed employer to ask about her, only to be told that she was actually sitting at Walmart, reading the newspaper and looking for jobs. The truth came crashing down. For nearly 3 months, she hadn't been working at all. She had been spending her days sitting in parking lots, streaming Netflix on her phone. My roommate had been baffled by the massive data bills. Now it all made sense. Not long after, she became pregnant again. Still living under our roof, his parents tried to intervene and kick her out, but he exploded, accusing them of trying to ruin his life. He never held a job himself, yet lived in a beautiful house that wasn't even his. Last week, she told me they'd be moving back to her hometown on the 11th and that her daughters were already enrolled in school there. The day came and went, but they never left. Unbelievable. Every single part of her story had been a lie. Yet, he continued to defend her, too terrified of loneliness to face the truth. And her family? They were no better, just as deceitful, if not worse. Story 5. My ex was a social worker, or at least that's what I believed when we first met. We got married far too quickly, caught up in what I thought was passion and compatibility. After the wedding, she moved into my house, unpacked her things, and within a few days, we had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Life felt calm, predictable, even warm. About 2 years later, everything changed with one frantic phone call. She rang me at work, crying and panicked, saying she had just lost her job and was at a gas station filling out an application. Wait, what? It didn't make sense that someone with a background in social work would lose her position and immediately rush to apply at a gas station. Something didn't add up. I left work right away, unable to shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. When I got home, my blushing bride was in tears, pacing the floor, calling every family member she had, trying to figure out what to do next. Over the next few days, the truth came out in fragments, each one more baffling than the last. First, she had been lying to both me and her employers about having a master's degree in social work. She had attended the program but only completed about a semester and a half before being kicked out after her grades fell below a B average. Second, the small agency she worked for had never conducted educational background checks, which allowed her to glide by unnoticed until a new director decided to verify everyone's credentials and enforce stricter hiring standards. Third, she had no intention of coming clean. In her mind, she was unemployable without that advanced degree and believed her only alternative was working retail. She did have a bachelor's degree in social work, but she was convinced that wasn't enough. Fourth, she seemed to have convinced herself that the lie had somehow become reality. Despite knowing the truth, she acted as if she truly held that degree. When the agency began the background checks, she didn't even panic. She had even applied for professional licensure, only to receive a rejection letter stating she wasn't qualified because she didn't have the degree she had claimed all along. This revelation sent her into a downward spiral. Our once steady relationship turned chaotic overnight. The woman who used to laugh easily and take pride in her appearance began wearing tattered clothes, neglecting basic grooming, and speaking as though everyone was conspiring against her. I watched helplessly as paranoia replaced the calm, thoughtful person I had once known. Eventually, she found another job, this time with a school district that accepted her bachelor's degree. The pay was slightly better, and she even had summers off, a small mercy or so I thought, but the peace didn't last. According to her, her new coworkers only deepened her paranoia instead of easing it. They whispered that I was being unfaithful, and she believed them. Apparently, her coworkers had planted the idea that I was probably cheating on her. They told her that because I had served in the Navy before our marriage, I was bound to be unfaithful. After all, according to them, all sailors cheat. They also questioned my frequent travel for work, insisting my schedule sounded suspicious. In reality, I worked as a claims adjuster on a catastrophe response team, deployed across the country whenever disasters like tornadoes, hurricanes, or mudslides struck. But one of her coworkers mentioned that her uncle was a State Farm agent who never traveled. And somehow, that flimsy comparison became proof in her mind that I was lying. At first, my wife simply believed I was exaggerating or fabricating details about my work trips. To reassure her, I began leaving my hotel information before every flight. Still, she called constantly to verify everything, checking with airlines to confirm I had boarded, contacting hotels to ensure I had reservations, and even asking the staff to describe the man who checked in to make sure it was me. It became exhausting, like living under investigation for a crime I hadn't committed. Then her suspicion took a darker turn. She convinced herself that I wasn't traveling across the Midwest for work, but to live out some secret life of pleasure. She began calling my hotel room at random hours, day and night, hoping to catch another voice in the background, or perhaps someone else answering the phone. The truth, though, was simple. I was either working long hours or collapsing into bed, too tired to even think straight. For the record, I had never been unfaithful to anyone I'd ever been with, not once. But in her mind, that didn't matter. Soon, she built an entire fantasy where I wasn't just cheating, but secretly maintaining another family somewhere else. She began combing through my bank statements, treating every cash withdrawal like a clue in her imaginary investigation. Eventually, I gave up and switched to using my debit card for everything, hoping that transparency would calm her down. Her friends didn't help. Instead of easing her suspicions, they stoked her anger. Together, they convinced her that the best way to handle a cheating husband was to get even. She started spending time with a college friend, and before long, they crossed a line. Not satisfied, she let another friend join them one night, and soon it became a routine she didn't bother to hide. On one of my last work trips before transferring into an office role, I decided to surprise her. I changed my flight to come home on Friday evening instead of Saturday afternoon. I pictured walking through the door, taking her out to dinner, maybe starting to rebuild what we had lost. After being gone for 2 weeks, I was simply looking forward to a quiet evening with my wife. But the moment I pulled up to the house, something felt wrong. The driveway was packed with cars, so I parked on the street. What was going on? The curtains were drawn tight, unusual for her. My heart sank. I knew walking up the front porch would make noise, so I slipped around to the back. We had recently rebuilt the porch, and it didn't creak, so I quietly removed my shoes and moved toward the kitchen. From there, I caught faint movement in the living room. My stomach turned as I stepped closer and saw my wife in our living room, entangled with 2 men. She stumbled between excuses, first yelling, "This isn't what it looks like," and then snapping, "Yes, I did it, and I'm proud of it." One of the men, unbelievably, had the nerve to tell me to leave because I was upsetting the lady. I told him calmly to put his pants on and get out before I called the police. He glared at me, muttered that I was an a-hole, and stormed out, telling her to call if she needed him. I turned to her and told her to pack her things and leave. I said we were done, and that I'd be filing for divorce immediately. She scoffed, tossed out a cold fine, and I told her to stay with her boyfriends. I'd forward her mail wherever she wanted. That Monday, I started calling lawyers. By Wednesday, I'd found one sharp and aggressive enough for what I needed. Within a week, she was officially served. Then came the calls, her screaming that she couldn't believe I was actually going through with it. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 weeks, and she was already living with one of the men from that night. The next few weeks were chaos. She came to collect her belongings while I changed the locks. I soon realized she had taken some of my things too, but by then I didn't care. About a month or 2 later, she reached out again, despite being told to speak through my lawyer, asking how we were going to handle the house. It was the final insult in a storm I never saw coming. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "We don't have to do anything. It's my house. It's in my name, and I had it before I had you. So, you're out of my house and free to get your own." She crossed her arms and snapped, "I'll buy you out." I shook my head, calm but firm. "You can't buy me out because you don't own any part of it. If you want it, you'll have to pay the full current market rate." That was enough to send her into a rage. My lawyer told me not to stress. At that time, in our state, there was no way she could touch the house unless she somehow won a massive judgment against me. The law protected property owned before marriage. It was the complete opposite of community property. Remember when I said she was unbalanced? Well, this is where it really showed. The guy she was living with was a complete mess. A chronically unemployed cook, security guard, and warehouse worker all rolled into one. He'd spent so much time on unemployment that he fancied himself an expert on it. That misplaced confidence made him believe he was basically a lawyer. And of course, she trusted every word he said. Watching them together was both comical and pitiful. Every time my lawyer scheduled a conference, they'd both show up. He'd toss around legal phrases he clearly didn't understand, trying to sound smart. My lawyer, ever patient, would calmly tell her again to hire a real attorney. When we finally went to court, her boyfriend tried once again to play lawyer. The judge immediately had him removed, reminding him he wasn't part of the case. She was officially representing herself. The judge quickly saw how stubborn she was about refusing proper counsel and even noted that my lawyer had documented at least 12 separate occasions where he'd advised her to hire one. She had no claim to my assets, none. The only thing remotely connected to her was the balance in our joint checking and savings accounts. I had stopped using them the moment I discovered her cheating and had already switched my direct deposit to a new account. Still, she had drained the old one completely. The bank statements made everything crystal clear. When the divorce decree came through, it was final. No, she didn't get the house. No, she wasn't entitled to alimony. No, she wouldn't recover any money she claimed to have spent on the property. And just to make things absolutely clear, the court ordered her to stay away from me and the house, citing her history of sneaking in and stealing things. My lawyer wasn't cheap, but he was worth every penny. I didn't end up needing the full extent of the shark I'd hired, but I was glad I went in prepared. She eventually married that same guy and had about 6 kids with him. I'm not sure if they're still together, but I do know he was arrested for selling prescription painkillers. He also picked up a misdemeanor for pretending to be a lawyer. No surprise there. Apparently, he even ran a little side hustle preparing legal forms and guiding people through unemployment claims. Ironically, the state actually had a legal representative program that allowed people to take a test, pay a small fee, and become certified to represent others before the board. If he'd just done that, he might have made something of himself, but that would have required not being a scumbag. As for her, she eventually earned her master's in social work after failing out of 2 programs. Third time really was the charm. Story 6. The one that comes to mind is this guy named Matt. I'll give you the full backstory as a little bonus since it adds some important context. We had a few mutual friends and met at a party. I saw him around pretty often and was always cordial, but he was a bit of a strange, nerdy guy, so we never really became friends. One night, I was hanging out with a girl, just watching a movie or something, when Matt texted me. He had a thing for her and wanted some tips. I gave him a bit of advice, he thanked me, and that was the end of it. About a week later, I stopped by a mutual friend's apartment and we started talking. She said she'd spoken to him a day or 2 earlier and he was furious with me. He decided I was hanging out with that girl while supposedly advising him on how to win her, and in his mind that meant I'd been involved with her physically. I hadn't. She had once exposed herself and kissed me, but I shut it down, wasn't interested. Whatever picture he'd built up made him livid. He told our friend and the rest of their group that he was going to find me and hurt me with a bullet or a knife. Obviously, I called a couple of other people who had been there to confirm the story. It checked out. Being the sort of guy I am, there was no way I was going to let that slide. I shot him a text, asking if he was free, and he replied that he was busy at work. Perfect. I jumped on my Harley and rode to the next town where he was working. He was at an Exxon station in the early afternoon, so there were still people inside. Not wanting to make a scene, I waited for the store to clear and then walked up to his register as his last customer was finishing. When he looked up and saw me, he turned and headed for the back office. The following conversation took place, not an exact transcript, but a very close paraphrasing. "Hey Matt, how are you doing?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound casual. He shrugged, keeping his hands in his pockets. "I'm doing okay, man. Pretty excited for the party this weekend. Are you going?" I shook my head. "Probably not. I think I have a date that night." He brightened. "Oh, well, maybe you could come by afterward." I gave a short laugh that didn't reach my eyes. "I doubt it." "There's going to be another one next week. It's going to be pretty big," he said. My jaw tightened. "Man, I don't care about that. You know why I'm here. I hear you, and I need to have a little chat." He frowned. "What? I don't know what the heck you're talking about." I stepped closer, cutting him off. "Cut the crap and lose the attitude. I heard you have some pretty big ideas about what you think you're gonna do to me. Rumor is, you're planning to put a bullet, or a knife, in me." For a long moment he stared at me, eyes wide. "What? I don't know what you're talking about. We're friends. I would never try to do that to you." I kept my voice low and steady. "Look, if I hadn't already checked around to see if it was true, I wouldn't have taken the time to come out here. It would be a really bad idea to lie about it now. Now's your chance. I'm standing right in front of you." He went silent, obviously uncomfortable, glancing around before meeting my gaze. "Nothing to say?" I asked. He exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. Yes, I said it. I was really mad. I thought you were making fun of me while telling me how to get with Kay, while you were over there banging her already." I cut him off sharply. "2 things. First, I wasn't banging her. She's not my type. I wouldn't have given you advice on how to get along with her if I were. I'm not that nice. Second, I don't care how mad you are. If you ever threaten me again, I'll put you in the hospital. I don't care that we have mutual friends. You know who I am. Disrespect will not get you far with me. Understood?" He swallowed hard, eyes lowered. "Yes." I waited, voice cold. "Yes. What?" He met my stare, voice small. "Yes, sir. I understand. It will never happen again." I left without another word. The whole situation had been completely unexpected. As far as I knew, and according to our mutual friends, Matt was a pretty normal guy. He had his own place, worked more than 50 hours a week, and when he came out to party with us, he acted like everyone else, aside from being a little odd. After that confrontation, though, Matt made a point of avoiding me. If I showed up at a party or event where he happened to be, he'd leave within the first 5 minutes. That was fine by me. I was never aggressive or rude toward him. I'd simply put him in his place after he decided to run his mouth. I'm not the kind of person who holds grudges, and as far as I was concerned, the matter was closed. Fast forward a couple of months, and Matt stopped coming around altogether. I noticed, but didn't think much of it at first. After some time, curiosity got the better of me, so I asked someone if something had happened. I was told that there'd been some kind of incident involving one of the girls who used to hang around, but nobody seemed to know the full story. Later, I went out of town for a few months for work. When I came back into town, I attended a party with the whole social group. Eventually, someone brought up Matt in conversation. Out of curiosity, I asked what had happened to him. Apparently, he had been texting back and forth with a few girls younger than him while he was about 30. They were sending pictures back and forth. He ended up getting caught when he met one of the girls and behaved inappropriately. It turned out that this had been going on longer than I had known him. I had no idea, but apparently, a couple of people in the group who knew him better had heard rumors for a couple of years. That whole situation was freaking weird and disturbing. It was one of the most extreme double lives I have ever personally seen revealed, and it completely changed how I viewed him and our social circle. Story 7. A few years ago, I started a business with a friend. As we traveled for work, we spent an enormous amount of time together and got to know each other in ways I hadn't expected. Over time, secrets began to surface, and I can't remember ever being so shocked by the hidden life of another person. This woman was Canadian and had taken a job as a bank teller right after college. Growing restless with her routine life, she decided she wanted to move to the United States, so she embezzled money from the bank to make it happen. She fled the country, changed her name, and started an entirely new life. She made friends, settled in a place she chose for herself, and left behind her quiet, uneventful existence in Canada. Her new life was fueled by drugs, alcohol, and reckless adventures. During a rock concert campout, she even shaved her head in the style of Britney Spears. Back in the mid-80s, that was almost unheard of for women, and it certainly drew attention. Soon after shaving her head, she met a man who asked about the sudden change. Without hesitation, she told him she was undergoing treatment for cancer. To her surprise, he responded with compassion and asked her out. They began dating, and the relationship quickly became serious. Her boyfriend was deeply supportive. He went with her to supposed doctor's appointments and even attended cancer support groups by her side. Behind the scenes, she worked tirelessly to conceal her real life and ongoing drug use. When she met his parents, they were moved by what they saw as the story of a kind, brave young woman battling cancer, completely unaware that she was still secretly using drugs. Seeing in him a path to stability and a way out of her chaos, she accepted his marriage proposal. But before the wedding, she checked into what she claimed was a cancer treatment center, when, in truth, it was a drug rehabilitation facility where she went to detox and try to start over. They eventually married and stayed together for 20 years, raising a daughter. Her husband and his family believed she was a good Mormon girl from Utah who had survived cancer. She never revealed that she was actually Canadian or that she had entered the United States illegally. I don't know exactly how she fell back into drugs or how the authorities finally caught up with her for the embezzlement and immigration issues. She shared this story with me about 10 years after she had been found out. Remarkably, she was still married to the same man, who now knew the truth, though his family remained in the dark. Their daughter was also unaware of her mother's past. How they managed to conceal such an extraordinary web of lies is completely beyond my understanding. During a week-long business trip through Europe, she gradually shared fragments of her story. By then, we had been working together for about 9 months, and business was going well. Then one day, while paying bills, I discovered that our business account was overdrawn, something that should have been impossible. When I confronted her, she admitted that she had withdrawn $50,000 from the account for a long weekend in Las Vegas. She had no plans to tell me. This had happened just the week before. Neither I nor her husband had any idea she had gone to Las Vegas. She had simply taken the money and disappeared. I was stunned. I didn't know how to react. As my business partner, she had full access to the funds, so it wasn't technically theft or embezzlement. Still, I was floored. The same woman who had confessed to me about being an embezzler, con artist, liar, and thief had just swindled me. I had seen her as a quiet, easygoing suburban mom, educated and reformed after her past mistakes. The reality was far darker than I ever could have imagined, and I was left deeply shaken. 3 days later, she passed away of OD. At some point, she had returned to using drugs. She was found in an empty trailer in a parking lot in Stockton, California. No one knew why she had traveled there or what she was doing in that trailer. The unanswered questions have haunted everyone who knew her, and there has never been any clarity. The heartbreaking irony is that her husband and daughter later admitted that her death was, in their view, the best possible outcome. Soon afterward, even more secrets began to unravel: hidden bank accounts, a secret apartment, and other fragments of a double life that no one had suspected. The financial and emotional aftermath was devastating. Even now, thinking about it leaves me stunned. Real life can be far more twisted, surreal, and shocking than anything found in fiction. If someone tried to write a story like this, no one would ever believe it. My business partner confessed to embezzlement, lying about having cancer, and a long history of drug addiction. She claimed to have reformed, but more than 20 years later, she deceived me and her own family, drained our business funds, returned to drugs, lived a double life once again, and ultimately died of an overdose. People often ask why I didn't look into her background before starting the business. The truth is, I had known her personally for 15 years, during which she had been a respected and successful professional in a niche industry. I knew her entire family, none of whom had any idea about her past, except for her husband. You simply don't expect someone you've known that long and trusted that deeply to be concealing such serious secrets. From the moment she first revealed her past to me, which I never completely believed, to her death, only 7 weeks passed. Story 8. I've got 2 examples. I will do my best to keep these as anonymous as possible while still telling the stories in full. One person I knew spent most of their life in the house where they grew up and was generally introverted. They were warm and affectionate during family visits, showing genuine care for their loved ones, and they maintained steady employment through nearly all of their adult life. However, after the death of their last surviving parent, their home began to deteriorate. Mail piled up, cats roamed freely, and clutter took over. I later learned that they had never assumed household responsibilities as their parents aged and had quietly developed a long-standing habit of going to bed with a bottle nearly every night of their adult life. Efforts at recovery and rebuilding only began after retirement, but the process has been filled with difficulties as these long-buried truths have come to light. The second double life I've encountered was much shorter but infinitely stranger. After graduating from college, this person signed a lease with their best friend to move into an apartment together, seeking independence rather than returning to the small childhood home dominated by their parents' strong personalities. They had been promised a job with the same organization where they had worked as a student, but even 3 months, 2 months, or 1 month before graduation, the position never became concrete. It remained an expectation rather than a reality. Eventually, the opportunity disappeared into a bureaucratic void, leaving them dependent on savings from a full-time summer job to cover their living expenses. Their best friend's parents generously stepped in, covering both portions of the rent and even offering a loan, which they later forgave entirely. That year was an incredibly difficult one. No professional opportunities appeared until late fall, when this person finally secured a position at Walmart. Around the same time, their partner moved into a small rooming house near the store. The walk from the rooming house to Walmart was an hour each way, while the apartment was much farther, so a compromise was made. They could stay with their partner on work nights, provided they kept it quiet from others in the building. Just before Black Friday, they abruptly stopped showing up for work. The job felt unsafe, paid very little, and offered hours that didn't align with the limited public transportation schedule. Around that time, they accepted the kind offer from their best friend's parents, marking a significant turning point in that turbulent chapter of their life. A few months later, they landed a better cashier job at another department and grocery store chain. It was closer to the rooming house, much safer, and offered more reasonable hours. After several months, both this person and their partner officially moved in together once their leases ended. Unfortunately, a string of questionable cash drawer discrepancies caused by a faulty counting machine eventually resulted in their termination due to company policy. They were unemployed for about 2 weeks and went without income for an entire month. Then, they secured a temporary position as a bookseller at a college bookstore. The store manager quickly recognized their diligence and competence, placing considerable trust in them, and it proved well earned. Over time, the temporary role evolved into a steady part-time position. The manager took a personal interest in their development, enrolling them in an internship management training seminar and preparing them for greater responsibilities ahead. They remained in that job for quite some time, dedicating themselves wholeheartedly until they completed the seminar and were fully ready to take on a department manager position at another branch of the bookstore chain. When the opportunity came, they and their partner relocated to a new city closer to their parents. In this new chapter, their relationships deepened into genuine adult connections grounded in mutual respect and understanding, finally relating to one another as equals. It was a fulfilling period for everyone involved. To the best of my knowledge, this person continued working as a department manager at the second branch for a substantial stretch of time. Yet, beneath this surface of stability, a quiet, double life endured. They never told their parents that the job they had once claimed to have secured, the one that disappeared before graduation, had never actually existed. From their parents' perspective, it looked as though they had held that role for years, and when they moved closer to home, it seemed like they had simply transferred to a similar local position for better pay and proximity to family. Even their partner and close friends were kept in the dark about the truth. They only learned about it long after the move, when the carefully maintained illusion had already become part of the past. One person appeared to live an ordinary, stable life at home, but was secretly struggling with alcoholism for decades. Another fabricated a job opportunity, sustaining the illusion for years through several job changes and relocations, successfully concealing the truth from their parents, partner, and friends for a long time. Story 9. My brother has always been a pathological liar, truly to an extraordinary degree. It's odd because he's 16 years older than I am. Our father was constantly occupied with work and tending to the land, while our mother was a heavy drinker who would wake at 4 in the morning, drink while watching television until I left for school at 7, then go back to bed. Because of this, I spent most of my childhood living with my older brother. He became more of a parent to me than either of our actual parents ever was. He took me to school each day, picked me up afterward, cooked our meals, and on weekends he would take me to amusement parks, movies, and mini-golf. He tried to be the kind of guardian he himself had never known, but believed I needed. When I turned 16, he left to join the military, and I returned to live with our parents. By that point, I was self-sufficient enough to manage on my own. 4 years later, we saw him walking down the road in uniform, dragging his duffel bag and wearing a badly bruised face. He had run over a landmine in Afghanistan, undergone plastic surgery, and lost part of his frontal lobe as a result of the injury. But that wasn't even the most startling revelation. A few weeks after his return, he came home with a woman from the Philippines and 2 children. He had married her before deploying to Afghanistan, after meeting her while stationed in Korea following his basic training. That was when I met my niece and nephew, 8 and 4 years old. The girl, however, wasn't biologically his. She had been born before his marriage, and her mother had never known who the father was. As the months passed, I began to notice alarming changes in my brother. He had become a heavy alcoholic, much like our mother had been. He started drinking constantly, around the clock, smoking pot, and even using powder in the bathroom. One night, while he was supposed to be watching my nephew, a mirror fell and gashed the boy's arm open. I had to rush him to the emergency room while my brother, completely high, remained oblivious to what had happened. Not long after that, I started noticing my belongings disappearing one by one, things I later found in his possession. I chose not to confront him, remembering everything he had done for me when I was younger. Then one evening, everything came crashing down. My brother kicked down our front door with a hatchet in his hand, screaming at our mother before hurling it, missing her by inches. He shoved her against the television, sending it toppling over. My father, frail and tethered to an oxygen tank from his chemo treatments, tried desperately to calm him, pleading for him to stop. But my brother turned on him, throwing him into the fireplace and kicking him in the stomach. I grabbed my baseball bat and struck him once. He turned toward me with a hollow, haunted look and said, "Go ahead, after everything I did for you growing up." For a moment, our eyes met, and something in me broke. Then our neighbor burst through the door, saying he had called the police after witnessing everything from his porch. My brother snatched up the hatchet again and jumped out the window. Moments later, his wife arrived, their children crying uncontrollably. She begged for help finding him, but I could only focus on my father until the EMTs arrived. The police later found my brother hiding in the bushes and arrested him. My mother filed for a restraining order soon after, and he eventually moved to Florida. A few weeks later, an old acquaintance showed up, a man I recognized from my childhood. He had been my brother's friend and once our roommate. What he told me left me speechless. My brother, it turned out, had 2 other children in town, both close to my age, whom he had completely abandoned. Even more disturbing, this man revealed that my brother had gotten his wife pregnant, but that they were both fine with it, having been involved in a shared intimate relationship with him. Then came the final blow. My brother had always been a thief. He had stolen $10,000 from a local video store and a fast food restaurant years earlier. That, the man said, was how my brother had been able to afford all those outings and treats when I was a kid. It's been 7 years now. Our father has passed away and our mother's health is failing. Every so often, my brother reaches out, claiming he remembers nothing of what happened, insisting that his wife twisted his mind. I've grown close to his old friend, and whenever my brother resurfaces, he plays the brain damage card with me. But to that same friend, he calls me and the rest of our family worthless, saying he hopes we rot. He's even offered to be the man's personal companion if he helps sneak him back into town, sending him photos of himself in revealing outfits and a wig. At this point, I no longer recognize who he is. My brother raised me until I was 16, then left to join the military. 4 years later, he returned with a wife and children, but had become an addict and a violent alcoholic. He nearly destroyed our parents' lives and then disappeared. Over time, I learned about the web of lies he had spun, hidden children, theft, and warped relationships. It's hard to accept that the person who once felt like my only family may never have truly existed. Story 10. I met a group of girls and women in the early 2000s through a Venezuelan forum where we often discussed women's issues and shared life experiences. Over time, we grew close, chatting constantly through text messages, MSN Messenger, emails, and later WhatsApp. Our connection deepened and we supported each other through both joyful and difficult moments. Even after the forum eventually shut down, our bond endured. We stayed connected on Facebook, shared photos, and met up whenever we could, so everyone knew what the others looked like. During those early years, one of the girls suddenly vanished from our circle, a disappearance that didn't seem unusual at the time. We knew her as Mary, a white, brown-haired woman in her early 30s, pictured sitting inside her car. She told us she was a school teacher with a master's degree in child psychology and that she also helped run her family's store. She often mentioned having lived in Spain as a child and spoke with a distinct Spanish accent. Nothing about her ever seemed out of place. She was mature, intelligent, and always offered thoughtful advice. Years went by, and then one day Mary reappeared with unexpected news. She said she had become a flight attendant, still living in Venezuela, but now traveling the world. She would send messages at odd hours, sharing photos from Paris, Mexico, and other cities, saying she was either working or resting after a long flight. Occasionally, she called and we would talk for hours, catching up on life as if no time had passed. Later, she told us she had converted to Judaism and no longer went by the name Mary. We didn't question it much. It was her life, her choice. But soon, we began noticing something strange. Her new photos looked different. Her facial features seemed subtly altered. When we asked about it, she denied having any cosmetic procedures and blamed the differences on lighting or camera angles. Still, something about her appearance didn't quite sit right. By the end of 2014, she told us she had met a man in New York City and that they had been seeing each other for quite some time. I still remember her exact words. She said she no longer needed us as friends because she had found everything she wanted in him, and that they were engaged to be married in March of 2015 in New York. The message hit us like a wave. It's rare for someone to so bluntly say they no longer need your friendship, and it left us stunned and heartbroken. Still, it was her choice, and we could do nothing but step back and respect it, however painful it felt. A couple of months later, on a Friday night, one of the girls was scrolling through random photos on Instagram when she suddenly sent me one, asking, "Hey, isn't this Mary?" The picture was of a Brazilian model, white, brown-haired, and almost identical to Mary. Then it hit us: every photo Mary had ever sent, the ones from Paris, Cancun, or wherever she claimed to be, had actually been stolen from this Brazilian woman's page. We were stunned and didn't know how to react. One of the girls decided to confront her publicly on Twitter, since we were all connected there. Mary's response was immediate and explosive. She lashed out, calling us naive and ungrateful, and claimed she was a secret agent working for Venezuela's freedom. According to her, we should have been thankful for her sacrifices and understood the danger she faced. At that point, we didn't know what to believe anymore. Was she really a teacher, a flight attendant, a spy, or none of those things? Determined to uncover the truth, we searched the alumni records of the private college she said she had attended, but her name was nowhere to be found. Soon after, she blocked all of us on social media, deleted every account we knew of, and disappeared without a trace. After some time, she resurfaced online under a different name, only to vanish again soon after. Then, just a few weeks ago, we found her once more, this time on Twitter, seemingly using her real identity. But after 14 years of friendship, we understood that we no longer knew who she truly was. The woman we had shared our lives with, the one who had laughed with us, comforted us, and offered advice, might never have existed at all. Every conversation, every shared memory had been built around a stranger wearing the mask of someone we thought we knew. Story 11. When I was 32, I was doing well in my career but felt it was time to put more effort into my love life. So, I decided to give online dating a serious try. After a long stretch of bad matches and disinterest, I started chatting with a woman who seemed almost perfect. She had recently moved from the East Coast with her best friend. Let's call him Dave, and her mother had relocated as well. She said she was planning to go back to school in this new city. We met in person, and for about 2 months, everything felt wonderful. Then, small red flags began to surface. Still, instead of backing off, I convinced myself that this was just part of taking chances, that I needed to push past my usual caution and actually try to be open, social, and normal. At around the 3-month mark, after she had been spending 2 or 3 nights a week at my place, she and her best friend Dave got into a fight, and she suddenly needed somewhere else to stay. With no family nearby, she asked if she could crash at my apartment, bringing along just 2 boxes of belongings. I said yes, convincing myself once again that I was just being kind and reasonable. That night, we got drunk, slept together, and decided to sort everything out in the morning. But the next day, things began to unravel quickly. She quit her job because of the move, and her behavior started getting increasingly suspicious. I decided to pull together some cash to help her move in with her mother because by then, the warning signs were impossible to ignore. One night, she came home completely wasted and actually tried to physically attack me. At some point, she had even stolen my debit card while I was at work, supposedly to buy groceries, but instead spent the money on random junk. Then, a few weeks later, she dropped the biggest bomb of all. She told me she was pregnant, claiming it had happened the night she moved into my apartment. I managed to bite my tongue and swallow my pride when she said she wasn't getting an abortion, so I never mentioned it again. Over the next 9 months, she did little more than sit around spending and stealing money until I had to rely on payday loans from Money Mart for a year just to stay afloat. She didn't care. She knew I had a soft spot for children and had always wanted one. By then, she wasn't a partner anymore. She was just a roommate I couldn't stand. The child was born, and everything grew even more complicated. One night, she became violent again, trying to assault me with household objects as weapons. The police were called, and I ended up moving out of my long-time apartment. A few weeks later, I learned that her friend Dave, someone she'd had a falling out with, had moved out west with her. She had left her fiancé back east to live with him, only for the relationship to fall apart when she became involved with another man. Dave found out after she withheld access to my son. In his anger, he broke into her social media accounts and uncovered other things. Life spiraled into a drunken, depressive chaos, and I eventually lost my dream job because of an unrelated situation. Since then, she has changed her style, her hair, her personality, and even the way she speaks to fit in with a new crowd and a new man. Over the course of 3 months, I watched her shift from straight brim hats, flannels, and Timberlands to pink hair, punk-studded coats, and homemade tattoos. Her new hardcore punk persona seems to have become her permanent identity, reinforcing her image as a struggling single mother. About every 6 months, she has a new boyfriend and a new roommate, and roughly 95% of her friends turn over. Sorry for the long story. My court date is 3 weeks away. I am too poor for therapy, let alone a lawyer. It has been a lot of stress, sleepless nights, and caring for a special needs child who stays with me over half the week. I hope things work out for me soon. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.